And Network. We are back this week with part 3 of our 4-part series called Big Box Kids. So if you've been with us before, you know that we are sliding down the course of getting our kid brands or athletes, models, actors into retail stores. And I want you to begin visualizing your child as a long-term brand with a long-term following, because it can only serve them as they get older. So if this concept is new to you, please stick with us. We're gentle, we promise, and we'll take you down that road. Specifically, we're talking about getting your kid brand into retail. So I am joined today with expert Tim Bush, which you'll meet in just a moment. But if you want to go back and take a look at the rest of our series, if you've missed parts 1 and 2, go to bigboxkids.com, much like you see over there. And you can download the workbook and you can see the prior videos before you get to part 3, which is today. Today, we will be talking all about the buyer relationship and kind of how to unlock the Oz behind the curtain, right? Which is kind of what I attribute most buyers feeling like. So stick with us. Today is going to be chock full of information, and we'll let you know what our big crescendo on part 4 is going to be. Huge surprise, tons of value. So please share this link out, invite your friends, because we're about to get started on our part 3. So we will bring in Mr. Tim Bush. There he is.
There I am. Okay. Hey, everybody.
Hello, Tim. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Excited to get into this because I've been waiting for this conversation. But, you know, I have been remiss in our last couple times. I have not shared our Kid Entrepreneur Manifesto. And I don't know if I've shared this with you, but
You did?
I did. So
Yeah.
I want to just share it really quickly so that we can kind of reset and kind of define what we're talking about here, if you don't mind.
I don't.
All right. So here it is. And it is our Young Entrepreneurs Manifesto. And you can actually, if you signed up for this, you'll get it in your email. And this is for children that are making a difference, whether they're 8 or 19, it doesn't matter. But we tell them my age is my asset, not my obstacle. I am not too young to know what I want. I am not going to lose interest. I am a dreamer and a doer. Fear and judgment does not hold me back. I affect change, I make a difference, I innovate, I welcome failure, and I am a young entrepreneur. So this is kind of our North Star, our mantra for our young entrepreneurs. We want them to kind of own this, believe it, and keep it at heart as they're building their big empire, so to speak. So with that being said, Tim, you've got a lot of excitement for us today because you're going to pull back the curtain.
Always. We're always pulling back the curtain. And real quick about your manifesto, I think that all kids have ideas. And it's only the lack of parents to take those ideas seriously that really becomes a roadblock. So I think that manifesto is as much for the kid to understand about themselves, but for the parents to understand about their kids. Also, because, you know, when somebody says, oh, I thought about this or I had this idea, and a lot of times, oh, yeah, oh, no, that sounds good. Oh, honey, yeah, just run around and play. Some of those ideas are $1 million ideas.
Oh, yeah.
$1 million ideas. And so, you know, while we're working with our head down, trying to figure things out, your kids might already have that figured out. They might already have the answer. And so, and then secondly, I think a lot of times, wherever you are in your journey, and maybe you're just beginning and you're thinking, hey, information about getting into retail is so far down the road for me that I'm not as interested right now, or I'm not absorbing a lot of what you're saying right now because I think it's so far away. I would say to you, it's never too early to start thinking about this stuff. People ask me all the time, you know, when should I call you in my journey? I'm like, tomorrow is when you should call me, because every aspect of what you're doing has consequences. Every turn you make puts you on a different path. And so, people like you, Liz, and myself, our job is to keep you on the path to where you're trying to get to. And the journey to retail is long and has a lot of different turns that you can make. And so our job and why we're doing this is to try to make sure that you're not making one of these turns that puts you out into the desert, and it's going to take you some time to get back. So no matter where you are in your journey, this information is still relevant. And so make sure you're jotting it down, because there will be a time, and I hear this all the time, especially on the podcast. People finally email me and say, you said something back in episode 41 and it just happened. And I'm thinking, holy moly, what was episode 41? I have no idea. And what did I say? Because my podcasts aren't scripted. So I don't know what I said. I could have said it 10 different ways, 10 different times.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, don't think the information is not for you. Write it down. It will come in handy at some point in your journey.
Yeah.
All right. So last week we talked about, finding out who your customer is, where they shop, and then, where you want to target, where you really want to take your brand, and why that's important. For a small little recap is, just because someplace is easy to get into or somebody actually shows interest in your product doesn't necessarily mean that retailer is right for you, right for your brand, going to be right for you long term. To start out, you need to decide, who is my customer? Where am I going? Where do they shop? And then those are the retailers you're going to target. Okay, just because the buyer from Tuesday morning comes to you and says, I really love this product and I want to buy 10 containers. If all you want to do is sell to discount stores, maybe that's a good option for you. But if you're thinking about down the road, I want to be in Target and I want to be in Costco and this and that, then selling to Tuesday morning right off the bat is not going to be a good brand strategy for you. So hopefully from last week, you guys have a little bit of a retail list. Now, then you go about finding out who the buyer is. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. You can call their corporate office. You can, there's many different subscription services that are just databases of companies and people that you can subscribe to, and you can type in and find out who the buyer is for this, or at least get close. Probably the cheapest, easiest way is just to call the head office and say, hey, I'm trying to speak to somebody in the shoe department, the shoe buyer. Okay, here you go. And kind of do that legwork. So what I recommend is, once you have your list of retailers, go about finding out the buyers for those retailers. Don't take retailer one, find out the buyer, and contact them. Get your list together, okay? And I'm going to tell you why you're going to do that. There's two things I want you to look at after you find out the retailer and the buyer. I want you to try to find that buyer on LinkedIn. And I want you to find the company on LinkedIn. And the reason I want you to do that is I want you to see what the buyer's posting about, what they're interested in. And then I want you to find out what the company is doing. Maybe they just did a spin-off company. Maybe they just bought a company. There's something going on in the news for that company that could be of interest that you might be able to mention in your initial email to the buyer. The more common ground you can create with a buyer, the faster they're going to respond to you. And I'll give you a really good example of that. I was trying to, and this, by the way, the funny thing about this is a buyer I'd actually already sold once a couple of years earlier. And so I'm like, they know me. I'm just going to type them, hey, what's up? So I sent them an email. I had this new product, and crickets, really nothing, total radio silence. And for couple weeks, easy. I emailed them several times and zero response over the course of a month. And I was like, thinking that I should have had a relationship. I've sold you something before. I referenced that in the email. Apparently that didn't matter. So each of the company employees of this particular company, they were smaller, had a profile on their website. And I looked down the profile and I found out that her grandson's name is Tristan. And why that was interesting to me is my mother wanted to name me Tristan when I was born. My father was in Vietnam at the time and wrote back, no, we're not going to name him Tristan. And not that Tristan's a bad name. My dad apparently just wasn't on board with that. Anyway, he thought people would call me Tris for short or something like that. Anyway, I started my email with that story. I see your grandson's name is Tristan. Hey, my mother wanted to name. She emailed me back. It wasn't even 30 seconds later that I got an email back from her. And that's because I created some common ground with her, got her attention, and bam, she emailed me right back. So,
and I love that tactic. I've been using it, recommending it for, oh my gosh, like the beginning of my career. I love it. It also makes you feel more confident in drafting it because you know a little bit more. It's not, like I said in the beginning, it's not a green Oz behind a curtain. Like, you see that they're real, you see their kids, you see their job history. So it actually kind of eases you into that communication as well. You see their face, what they look like. So yeah, I love that point.
Yeah. So once you, and by the way, so we kind of skipped forward. Common ground is something I use when I can't get a response. I don't lead with common ground because it seems a bit familiar, and I'm going to use that when I'm not getting a response my normal way. And something we're going to talk about next week, part of our surprise, is what it is that you're going to send the buyer in the email. Today, we're going to talk about the email, how you're going to connect with them, what types of things that you should say. And next week, we have a really big show for you because we're going to kind of bring it all together and we're going to teach you some things that nobody teaches anybody. And I've learned over the course of 25 years and 10 years doing TLB consulting, some key mistakes that people make when they're reaching out and what they reach out with. But today, so back to today, let's say you're going to email a buyer, and this is not a personal email. This is not like, hey, let's go swimming or let's have coffee. This is a professional email. Okay. It's not a text message. You're not going to use abbreviations. You're not going to use LOL. You're not going to put emojis in there. You're not going to do any of that. Okay. I can't impress upon you enough that when you or your child reaches out to somebody in the business world, at the beginning, you need to be professional. And professionalism says so many things about you. It says so many things about your company. It says so many things about what the buyer can expect. Because understanding that every buyer receives hundreds of emails every single day, hundreds, 400. I know buyers that come back from vacation, they have something like 6,000 emails when they get back and they delete them all. Boom, just across the board, they delete them. So understand, by the way, a little tidbit, if you email a buyer and you get a vacation response, they're not going to see your email when they get back. You're going to need to wait till they're back a week and then re-email. They're not going to be sifting down through 6,000 emails and be like, oh, look at that one. No, I'm going to call that person back. A lot of times they just delete them across the board and say, hey, if it's important, they'll get back to me. I've actually seen it happen in real time. So professionalism, who are you and what are you trying to say? Okay. A lot of times I see people, they want to start their email with a really cool little quip on the subject line. Okay. I'm going to recommend that you don't do that. Now, I'm not going to say that doesn't ever work, but I'm going to recommend right now for this purpose of this, that when you are reaching out to a big box buyer, okay, we're going to talk about two different types of buyers, big box and specialty. A big box buyer, what I want you to put in your subject line is the name of your company, and then the little, where is it? It's above the slash line, and it's just a straight up and down line. So the name of your company, space, straight up and down line, space, and then new product, space, line, space, and then the name of the product. Okay, that's what I want. That's very clear. Who is it? This is a new product email, and this is what the name of the product is.
Yes.
Maybe they want to read it, maybe they don't, but they at least know exactly what it's about. Okay. Yeah. Does that, how do you normally subject line your emails, Liz?
I'm a marketer, so I'm all about the quip and the top. But I am, when I receive, like, I totally want that efficiency as well. Like just get to it, man. And I can see if you had a shoe product and you accidentally connected with the baby buyer and you had, your shoe item right there in the subject, they can be like, that's not for me, forward. So the efficiency definitely is appreciated. I can see how that could be welcome.
Yeah, and they might put it into a little basket of new products that they're going to look at the appropriate time. That's actually much better for us than for them to just scan down through it really fast while they're looking at their hundreds of emails and make a decision right then. A lot of buyers are going to say, well, Tuesdays is when I look at my new product emails. And so now that they know exactly what that is, they may shift it down into this little bucket and say, okay, well, that's going to be for Tuesday. And by the way, I am going to tell you when the little quip works or is appropriate. And we'll talk about that next. In your email, who are you? Okay, who are you? Hello, buyer. And then who are you? My name is Tim Bush. I'm the vice president of blah blah blah. So I might say I'm the vice president of ABC company, whose specialty is blah 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 blah. Okay, so now they know this is about a new product and they know exactly who they're talking to.
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
Because something that kind of annoys me a little bit is when you're a mom and you're talking about your kid, or dad for that matter, and you lead with, I'm the CEO of, like, no, you're really not the CEO. Like, you're just trying to push a product. So, and we label ourselves as CEO of absolutely every project we're involved with. So what do you recommend there? Should we just kick the CEO title to the curb? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I don't know. It's sometimes for me, my title is generally going to be in the signature line of my email.
Mm-hmm.
VP of sales for CEO of TLB Consulting, whatever that is. I don't need to say it again at the top. And this is going to seem strange, and we may get some feedback, people saying yes or no, but I think the vice president title has been a little watered down now.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can pretty much name themselves a VP, and I've worked with companies that literally give out VP titles like they're like they're nothing, because it was known at one time that if you put a VP, especially in sales, if you had a VP next to your title rather than sales manager or this or that, you got a little bit more attention.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is I say, my name is Tim Bush and I work with this company. My name is Tim Bush and I'm representing this company. I don't say I'm Tim Bush and I'm the vice president of sales for the, because it's just overkill, especially when I have my title and my signature line. Now, I can't, sometimes, something will be going wrong with my wife's computer, and she'll say, well, what should I do? And I'm like, I don't know. I have to get on it and like try a couple things. Can't you just tell me what I should do? I'm like, no, because I don't know the answer. Sometimes I'll put my title in the top part. I can't tell you why I do it. I just have a feeling that it needs to be there. But for the purposes of this, I would say, hi, I'm, Mindy Jones, and, I work with, or, I'm involved in, or I am representing this company.
Yeah. Okay. So what else should be in that email after we state who we are?
Okay. So who we are, and then what we do. Okay. And when I say what we do, it's not this much what we do. It's this much, two lines, what we do. We've been hard at work. This is where a pitch clip will come in really handy. In a pitch clip is something that you can say to somebody that gets them really interested, or causes them to ask a question. I worked with a company for a while that made a kitchen composter, and this composter could compost food scraps in 3 hours. And so I would say, my pitch clip was, when people would say, what do you do? Oh, well, we make a composter that composts food scraps in 3 hours. Every single time you say that, somebody's going to say, well, what do you mean? Doesn't composting take like 2 weeks, 3 weeks? How does that work? And so that's where you put in who you are and what you do. So we do this. We work with kids so that they can enter into school with confidence. We build products for autistic children to help them in the developmental stage. Whatever it is that you do. And then the third part of that is a little bit about the product. Why? So we have a new product. We have an established product. We have a product that's been #1 on Amazon for, 3 years. And now we're ready to bring it to brick and mortar retail. And this is what the product is and a little bit about it. The key to any pitch email that you're sending a buyer is it can't be too long. Otherwise, they'll delete it. They'll just straight up delete it. If it's just, they look at it and if they have to scroll it all to finish it, they'll probably delete it. And then secondly, you can't include any information that they could technically make a judgment call on your product without getting more information. So you're not selling the product. And let me be very specific about this. You are not selling the product in the email. Okay. That's not what the email is for. The email is to gain interest, pique their interest. What is this? I need to know more about this. Yeah. You might even include in the email, we've had success at the Container Store, and we've had success at this retailer and this retailer, and we feel and then this is where you can, at the end of that paragraph about the product, is where you can put one line, pick out one thing, one reason that you think this product is right for them. I was in, based on my research into your customer base and that they're this age to this age, we understand that matches up perfectly to our current demographic, which is why I'm reaching out to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that point, because people automatically think I'm getting 15 seconds. I need to throw everything at them.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's really good advice, that it's not to sell, it's to pique interest. And, email 101 is cut out the extra words. Scan your email for all the extra words, especially when Tim advises, the one line about what your product does. Don't get fancy with your words, right? Make it concise and use short 8th grade words. Like, don't go past 8th grade or even 4th grade for that matter. You don't need to add in all of these adjectives in front of what it helps customers do. Like, it confidently and courageously allows children with advanced autism. Like, you don't need all of that, right? 4 or 5 words, 7 words the most. It's not even probably a complete sentence, and cut out the extra stuff so they can quickly, digest it.
Yep. Yeah, because you could say, helps autistic kids at the developmental stage, which I know is a focus of your company.
That's beautiful. Yes.
Something like that. Mm-hmm. Don't put that in there if it's not a focus of the company. But
yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Plain, simple language.
Yeah. And then the last thing that you want to do is you want to offer to send them a sample. Okay. Remember, and this is basically sales 101. Let me give you a little bit of sales tip. Gone are the days when generally face-to-face, you're going to introduce something, explain it, sell it, and close it all in the same place. Unless you're selling a house or you're selling, but even then, your main goal always is to create interest. Interest is everything. Interest stops you from, it stops the sales process and creates the collaboration process. Okay. So once you and I have an agreement that you're interested, now we're collaborators. Now we're really just trying to figure out how to get this product into your store. And is that going to work price wise, packaging wise, logistics wise? And so the interest is everything. Don't try to always close it and think that if you didn't close it on your first go round, all of a sudden I failed and this person's not, think about how much less pressure you would have on yourself if you're thinking, listen, this email, I'm going to send it. And really what I'm trying to gain is interest. I want them to email me back. That's your first goal. So when I set up So I have a procedure for all the retailers that I connect with for all my clients, and it has stages in it. And I take all these retailers through all these different stages, and that way I can look on a big screen and see, if I have 100 retailers that I'm going after, what stage they're all in, and if somebody's being left behind. So it makes it easy for me. The very first stage is just to send them an email and get a response. Any response. That's what I'm looking for. And that's why if you include too much information and they don't need to respond to you, and by the way, it's not any response. I'm not looking for the, hey, we're going to pass response. That's not what I want. But at least it's a no, and you're not left in the dark about what they're thinking. I want them to ask me for pricing. I want them to ask me for dimensions, packaging, whatever. I want them to ask me something, and start to create that interest, because you'll be amazed how things change when you move from selling to collaborating, and how all of a sudden you're sitting almost on the same side of the desk as the buyer, and you're no longer across from them. It really becomes a whole different ballgame. So you want to get, one of the ways to get interest is to get a sample in their hands. I know that it's difficult to really understand how quality this product is on a two-dimensional PowerPoint. So what I'd like to do is get a sample in your hands so you can try it and your team can try it and give me some honest feedback. What's the best address to send a sample to? Now, most likely you already have their address, but you always want it. That's another way for them to respond to you. So you want to put that in there.
So before the sample, do we send photos, images in the email? Do we link to our website? How do they first view our product?
Yeah, so you're going to have a buyer deck in there, and that's part of next week, right? That's part of our big. We're going to talk about buyer decks and the do's and the don'ts of buyer decks. But yes, you're going to have a presentation that's included in that. Putting links in your email. A lot of big companies filter out emails that have links, and so that email may never even get to the buyer. You can't have anything that's attached generally that's more than 5 megabytes. Otherwise, it gets filtered out. It's too big. So yeah, you're going to have something. It's going to show pictures, images, might have a lifestyle image. We're going to talk all about that on our next Friday. So you definitely don't want to miss that. I'm actually going to be in San Antonio because I have a conference there, but I'll be coming live to you from my hotel room.
Yeah.
But you don't want to miss that because that's where we're going to talk about that. But yeah, you're going to have the buyer deck. And, in that email, you want them to click on the buyer deck. If you give them too much information in the bed of the email, they don't need to click on the buyer deck. And you definitely want them to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So we send a sample, or how much, in your experience, if we're beginning this retail journey, right, we're pretty serious, we're putting some time, money, and energy behind this, perhaps we've hired a consultant like you, how much do you think we should allot, or even in amounts of quantity or financial investment, into samples?
It all depends on how many people you're going after. You absolutely want two things with every with every retailer that you go after. It is, as long as they're big retailers. You want them to ask for a sample because you believe in your product. If you didn't, then you wouldn't be here. And so you have to know that getting your product in their hands is going to make all the difference, right? If you don't think that, you got to stop right now and rethink your product, because if putting it in the hands of the buyer is going to be a bad thing, then we got ourselves a problem. Yeah. So you want that. And then you want a face-to-face if you can get it. So there's two things that you need to be prepared for. So if you're going after 20 buyers, you need at least 20 samples. And you have to be prepared to fly and meet with these buyers if they'll offer a meeting. And that's something I ask in a next, meeting. And sometimes I'll even ask it at the sample stage. I'll say, hey, can I send you a sample, or perhaps book a face-to-face meeting where I can do an in-person demo? So if the sample requires more demonstration, then I'll include that in that same thing. Very rarely on my first email will anybody book a live meeting with me. or anybody. That might come a couple emails down the road.
Okay. So what do we include in the sample that we send?
Great question. First of all, don't send. So this is going to sound weird, but my dog loves ice cubes. And so when we go to the freezer and we pull out the ice cube tray, he's right there. And so we fill our glass and we take one ice cube and put it in his mouth. It's the cheapest little dog treat that you could ever have. Now, when my mother-in-law is over, she thinks that if she gives him 2 ice cubes, then that's better. And and I'm like, it's not better, because now one just sits on the carpet and you're going to step on it and you're going to get wet. And so 2 is not better. He just wants 1. Now, he may want 1 10 times a day every time you go to the ice tray, but giving him 2 is not better.
Yeah.
Giving the buyer multiple samples is not better.
Unless they
unless they specifically ask for it. If they say, hey, I have a big team and I'd like to give 1 to this person and 1 to this person, so can you send me 2? Absolutely, send them 2. But if they're not asking you for that, don't send them 5 of everything. It's not better. It's gonna will get donated.
See, I'm so glad that you say that, because in blogger strategy, right, when you're trying to get publicity and coverage from bloggers, the strategy is a little different, because, like, for example, in our business, we have 6 different styles of pillowcases. So they're thinking about what their cost value is, or what their retail value is. So you have to kind of bump it up in order to get the coverage. So you recommend, if you're doing blogger strategy, you have to kind of, like, they want the big box of all the junk, like they want it, and that helps you. So I'm glad that you're saying this, because there's a difference clearly in retail promoting strategy and blogger promoting strategy.
Yeah, well, because buyers aren't videotaping their reveal, right? They're not like, oh, I got the sample from blah 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 blah, and let's open it and see what's inside. No. If you go into any buyer's office, it's stacked high with UPS boxes of samples that they haven't even opened yet. And or they have a big sample room, and that's where all the samples go, and then they have to go there. Yeah, now, if there's something significantly different, if you have multiple colors, I still would send them just 1 and let them know that it comes in multiple colors. But if you have the same product, but it's distinctly different for a boy or a girl, let's say, then you might send them both so that they can see the distinct difference. But otherwise, less is more. Yeah. Less is more. They can't keep them. They may get to take them home and try it, but they have to bring it back. They don't get to keep samples. It's against almost every retailer policy. And so sending them more, they're not going to hand them out to their family and blah, blah, blah. The other thing too, and I'm going to whisper this to you guys. If you let's say you sent 6 of one thing and they gave them to 6 different people in the office. Let's say they had a really good experience with it, but 2 other people didn't. You're done.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So anytime, there was this trend going around where when you used to interview, back when I was interviewing for jobs, that you'd interview with like 10 people and they collaborate and they all had to agree in order for, well, 10 people are never all going to agree. And so it was like the dumbest strategy, because you couldn't get hired anywhere because you couldn't get all 10 people to agree. If you send out multiple samples and they give it to multiple people, the chances that they're all going to agree that it's this wonderful item is pretty slim. And so 1 sample for the buyer, or maybe if 2, if they ask for it. Okay. I think we beat that to death, but it's important, because I know in our society, more is better, and it's not, more is not always better.
Now, I'm glad that you've hit on this sample, and I think we're gonna go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, because I know what everybody's thinking is, what else goes in there, like collateral, picture.
Oh yeah, well, you're going to talk about that. Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, my issue, as you know, is I've got a great product, my packaging, not so much. And that's what's standing in my way, and it's just a limiting belief of myself, is got a great product, but I don't think it's exactly right, spot on from a packaging standpoint. So that's what stops
I'm
me.
gonna go close my door. My dogs just came in and opened my door. So hold on.
Yeah. So I'll just keep sharing.
Yeah.
My problem is, and I see this quite often, is folks will have a wonderful product, wonderful story, but their packaging does not say retail ready. So you don't want to like just shove some loose item in there, right? So can you talk a little bit about the polish that should go into that sample?
Yeah. So, all right. First of all, let me tell you a couple things to put in there. You want to put whatever your buyer deck was that you sent with your email. You want to print that out, and it doesn't have to be like bound and clear cover. Staple is fine. And you
Okay.
want to make sure you staple your business card to it, or make sure that the back of the and we'll talk about this next week, but the back of the deck always has your contact information on it. That deck will get handed around with that product. And so um, and so you always want to, anybody that ends up with that deck, you want them to know how to get a hold of you. But that's it. Your business card, the deck, and the product. And really that's all you need. Now, if you're an Amazon seller and you're trying to transition into retail and you're working on some packaging concepts but you haven't actually built product with this packaging, that's okay. Don't don't stress about that, and don't not send a sample.
Mm.
They're not that concerned. If you're talking to the target buyer, they're going to have all kinds of feedback for your packaging. And so even if you made packaging, you had it all produced to send to this buyer, most likely they're going to have comments on it that will have to be changed anyway to fit into what they're wanting to do. What you do have to have is some renderings, some concept, and that will go in your buyer deck as to this is our current packaging. We have two different packaging concepts, and here's what we like about it. As we transition into big box retail. Now, of course, at some point they're going to want to see that produced, a production sample with that packaging, whatever packaging you guys. And we're getting like more into consulting now than just understand. Don't wait just because you don't have packaging,
Mm.
physical packaging yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but you do need to have some renderings, and I have a lot of information. That's one of those, by the way, on your road to retail. That's one of those turns that if you don't know some of the things, you can leave certain things out, and it'll really hurt you. So packaging is a big deal.
Yeah, when you mentioned the renderings to me a few months ago when we began, I was thrilled because I am a designer by nature, and I number one, I already had them for my own purposes because I couldn't decide what kind of a packaging would work best. And I would literally spend hours going up and down the aisles in retail looking at the type of packaging that was in the type of placement that I imagined my item being. And I would actually sketch these out and render them graphically. So when you said, I mean, it makes total sense, right? That you would say, these are the different options of how they may be displayed. I mean, number one, it shows that you're doing the work, right? You're realizing and you're kind of putting the effort into all the different areas so that you're being collaborative, like Tim mentioned. But also, it frees you up from number one, the expense of packaging, custom packaging, and it helps you on your journey figure out how your product best fits on the shelf, end cap, or what have you. So I love that, the fact that rendering is totally acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, if you have questions and you want to take deep dives into any of the stuff that we're talking about, obviously you can reach out to Liz. You can go right to my website and book a coaching call right on there. Makes it so easy. And we're happy to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, more specifically directly to you and your product. And remember what we said. When should you do that? Yesterday. Sooner is better, always. The more you have information, you have this.
And Tim, where's that book a call?
Oh, tlbconsulting.com.
TLBconsulting.com.
Yeah, tlbconsulting.com. And you just go to consulting, you can book it right on there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, unless you had anything more with what we're currently. Okay.
Move right along.
Let's talk about specialty and why emailing a specialty buyer is going to be different than emailing a big box buyer. Or let's also talk about how what you're selling and who you know the buyers are going to be could be different and might take a little bit different of an email strategy. So specialty, people that own their own stores, people that own their own stores are passionate about what they do, and they can be a little bit more whimsical. They can have a little bit more fun. They can think a little bit more. They want a little bit more variety. And so you can get a little bit more whimsical. And this might be where you want to have a catchy little subject line when you're emailing Bob at like Bob's Hardware. Um, we have a client that makes this product called Hookies, where no matter what type of fishing knot, if you're like me and you can't tie fishing knots, I just fish with the same jig all the time because I just can't change it. And then I need my brother-in-law, like I'm a little kid, to come over and change my lure for me. Well, this little thing makes it so anybody can tie any knot. Like if you're 2 years old up to me, you can tie any knot. Anyway, we might put in the subject line, tie any fishing knot, no matter how old you are. And that might be with Hookies, that might be our subject line, because we're emailing it to, an owner operator of a sporting goods store. And that person, because they're the owner operator, they know every single aspect of their building, and they know that tying fishing knots is hard. And so that's going to resonate to them more than it would resonate to a buyer who, along with fishing equipment, also has about 4,000 other items that they're responsible for. Not only that, but owner operators probably will be working directly with the customer. So they buy their own product for their store, but then when customers come in, it may be them that are going to help those customers. And so the more catchy you can make it, the more it'll stick in their mind when they have it. Oh, Hookies, yeah, that'll do that. And so you can have a little bit more fun, but the rules still apply. Professional with a little bit more fun. You still want to tell them who you are, what your company does, what you're offering. Do you want to sample? All those things, but you might just be speaking to them a little more casual, I guess. And then lastly, and I learned this in a big way, and my daughter actually helped me out with this, is I was selling for a client, I was selling a pimple patch. Mm-hmm. And we sold it to Anthropology and American Eagle and Birchbox and a bunch of it, where all the buyers were women in their 20s. Okay. I don't speak women in your 20s. So I got my daughter involved, and I wrote my email, and then I had her look at it and say, what might be some phrases that women in their 20s are using right now. Maybe you put the word awesome in there, or, I'm just spitballing here, but she helped me tweak it to be more what they would be used to hearing. And so you do have to know who your buyers are. 22-year-old women that are buying fashion and beauty and cosmetic products speak a certain language. That's not my language. So I had to find help from somebody. My daughter lives at Sephora and Ulta, and that's her language. That's not mine. So I got her help on that.
Good
but what's that?
Good advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think you also mentioned to me once before that you don't realize it, but if you're speaking the language of the buyer, whether it's big box or boutique, just like what he's mentioning. And I remember we were talking about Costco, you and I said the Costco customer, and you said, no, Liz, they're not customers, they're members. And you need to know when you're speaking to a buyer that they don't refer to their customers as customers, they're referred to as members. And it just elevates your game on such a whole new level when you don't go in there not knowing just the tiny things that make a difference. It just elevates your polish, your professionalism. So just like what Tim is saying now, I mean, if you're trying to pitch, an older white male or an African-American demographic or a hipster demographic, get a little bit of coaching either from your kids, friends, or neighbors to help you kind of massage your message so it's a little more deliberate.
Yeah, not inauthentic, but
Right.
like you said, deliberate. And specifically Costco or really any retailer, when you speak their language, they understand that you've done your research. Okay, you don't have to be a Costco expert like me, but if you take a little bit of time and find out how they speak, that you don't refer to one of their buildings as a store, it's a warehouse. So members shop at warehouses. Um, those little tiny things will make them understand you've done some research, you speak our language, therefore anybody that takes the time to do that is somebody that I want to look further at. Convert on the opposite end of that, if you're like, yeah, you're a customer this and your store that, they inherently know that you haven't researched Costco, and therefore you're just killing yourself. And it can, I know you might be thinking, really, can 2 words make that big of a difference? Yes, it can.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
it
now
can.
they're thinking, now I have to add an element of education into this
Right.
relationship. And you don't want that. You don't want them having a burden with your relationship. So
Not
that,
only that, yeah, not only that, but they want to work with people that want to sell Costco for a specific reason. Not because Costco's big, not because Costco sells a lot of product, but because the product, they like Costco. They like Costco's business model. They want to work with people that understand that. And if you can't speak their language, they understand that you're just there to make money and not really partner with them. And that's why if you look at LinkedIn for Target, and you find out, or like Bed Bath & Beyond, let's say when they bought they bought Harmon and they started putting Harmon stores inside, and let's say you were selling something like toothpaste or toothbrush or something, you can mention, hey, I know that the Bed Bath & Beyond just purchased Harmon. You guys are going to start putting Harmons within your stores. This would be a perfect fit in that new environment. This person is really doing my job for me, and really thinking it through. Not just they just want to put stuff on my shelf and try to make money, but they're really in it because they understand the business.
right. Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier going from across the table to the same side of the table when their shift in their mind goes to collaboration.
Right.
What do you attribute that shift? So what has to happen for the buyer for them to kind of shift into the collaboration?
Interest. Interest is what has to happen. Once the buyer's interested, and the way you can gauge interest is when the buyer starts talking about selling your product, where it might go, how it might look, who might buy it, what price is it, does that price really work, how do you guys deliver it, can you get to all our different DCs? All those types of questions are the buyer starting to think about what it would be like to sell this product. That's interest. Once you have interest from the buyer, now that move from selling to collaboration isn't a second, oh, they have interest, boom, now I'm on the other side of the table. It's a cultivated move. But the interest is the catalyst for that move. And you'll know, unless you're just one of those people that just can't stop selling. I always tell people, hey, when you sold the product, stop selling. So you'll know when to make that move. And when you start discussing the different aspects, when they say, hey, now we have 17 DCs across the country, can you guys ship to all those? And you start saying, well, we have warehouses on the East Coast, West Coast, and in the Midwest, and so we should be able to reach. When you start having a conversation like that, you're starting to move around the table and sit next to them and start talking about. It's no longer about whether they even want your product. It's no longer about whether their customers will buy it. Now you're into the nitty gritty of, does it work? And that's a key thing for people to understand. There's a difference between interest and actually getting the product in. And the whole part between interest and getting it on the shelf is all this information about whether the deal will work for them and for you.
Yeah. Now, I know that you just scared a bunch of our audience members
Oh
by
no.
by saying shipping and warehousing and DCs. And what if like I've just got buckets in my garage, right? And this happens to go well and they're excited and we feel the shift of collaboration, and then shipping conversation happens and we're like, what do you mean? I'm just gonna post office it over to you from my garage.
Well, that's really when it's good to have a coach, okay? To somebody to help you understand and say the right thing. You don't want to tell people, a big box retailer like Target, that your product's all in your garage. Okay, you don't want to say that. You want to have an understanding after working with a coach that it takes 1 week to separate the product in your garage and get it into multiple third-party logistic companies like Smart Warehousing, who has I think 8 or 9 different DCs all over the country. The one they have here in Florida actually has rail. So products can come directly from the port on rail right up to their warehouse. 2 weeks, you make a call to them. I'm doing a deal with this company. It's going to require hitting all these different DCs. Can I get my products distributed out of your third-party logistics? The answer is yes. And does it cost money to house product in a warehouse? Yeah. Does it cost money for them to pick and pack and ship it for you? Yeah. But we can show you how to build that into your costing ahead of time, so that once you've quoted the retailer, that's all built in there. So you don't have to worry about whether you can afford it or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't be afraid. There's answers for everything. And sometimes you have to say yes and then figure it out later. But I do a lot of coaching for companies outside the U.S. that are bringing their products into the U.S. In fact, not next week, but the week after, I'm going to be in London giving a seminar on bringing products to the U.S. And the biggest mistake that they make is saying no. Do you have products here in the U.S.? They'll say no, and then the buyer kind of just shuts them down. Do you have a warehouse here in the U.S.? No, and then the buyer just kind of shuts them down. So I help them say yes, but first, here's another, guys, you're not even paying for this, and I'm going to give it to you. Here's a key thing. Interest comes first before disqualification. So if a buyer says, before they've even told you that they're interested, if they start talking, well, do you have this and do you have that? I would be like, yeah, we can talk about all of that and warehousing and this and that. But what I'm really interested in is, are you interested in the product? And do you think it would be right for your business? Because if you say yes, then again, we start collaborating. Yeah, I tell these international companies the same thing that I'm telling you right now. It takes a week to put some product on a pallet and ship it to a third-party logistics company here in the U.S. And now, yes, I have product here in the U.S. Yes, I have a warehouse where it's housed and can ship to any of your DCs. The answer is yes, yes, yes. But do you have interest in my product? Because why would I do any of that if you don't have interest?
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes buyers are really looking to just disqualify you. I know it sounds bad, but they're looking to make it easy for themselves. It's not easy for a buyer to bring on a new product. It's not easy for a buyer to add a new supplier to their vendor network. Those things aren't easy, and they have to get sign off from their boss, which they hate. They absolutely hate it because their boss is going to grill them. Well, who's this company? What is it? That's when you send them your sample and the buyer deck is with there in hard copy. That's when it's great because they have that in their hand. They don't have to print it out. When they show their boss the product, here's the deck. They might leave the deck with their boss for them to go over, but they still have to sell it to their boss, and they don't like it. So a lot of times they're just looking to disqualify you with something easy so that they can get on to the next thing. Yeah. And it's important for you not to be intimidated by that, and say, hey, listen, I'm happy to talk about all those different things. What I really want to know first, though, is, do you have interest in my product? And do you think that my product would do well in your environment? And if the answer is yes, then okay, let's talk about logistics.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful kind of pause for those of us who are yes men and women. And yes, I can do that. Absolutely. You bet. And you don't know what you're signing on for. You don't know what resources and money it's going to take to do whatever you're agreeing with. So I think that's a wonderful kind of toll gate to stop everything that's going, or I should say slow down everything that's going quite quickly, especially if you're just representing yourself without any consultation, to say, okay, The interest is there. Now let me go get the help and the advice that I need on the shipping or, programs or whatever the case is that's being presented to you.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
and I think that, yeah, I see we have like 5 minutes left, and I think probably the last thing to leave you guys all with is, I'm sure if you've done any research online about selling into big box retail, you've come across, hundreds of people that say, "Oh, I got screwed. I got screwed by Walmart. I got screwed by Target. I got screwed. Oh, this product ended up back on my doorstep," and all these things. I want you to know that there's no big retailer out there that's looking to screw you. Okay, I've been in this business 25 years, and I've never ever come across a retailer that's specifically setting out to screw you. Now, they have business guidelines that they work on. Okay, and those guidelines are designed to be profitable for them first. They're not necessarily worried about if it's profitable for you. Maybe in an end they are, because they want you to be able to be sustainable with them. But they're looking out for their own interests first, and that's not a bad thing. It's it's the same thing that you're doing. And so remember, you're the last person that will sign any vendor agreement with any retailer. So if something ends up happening to you in that relationship, that you weren't ready for, it's because you didn't know what you were reading and you didn't know what you were signing. And so if you don't know what you're reading and you don't know what you're signing, find somebody, whether it's me or Liz or anybody else, that can help you with that. Because once you sign, you are accountable for what they're going to do next. If that product shows up on your doorstep, that's because it was written in the agreement that you signed that they could do that if it wasn't selling for some reason. And also, when you work with somebody that can help you, and once until you're schooled up on that, is there's 100 different things you can do with a buyer before that product shows up on your doorstep. Okay, I've never in 25 years had product just show up on my doorstep from any one of my clients. Never. Because we're always proactive in making sure we're selling our product. I know we're just getting into total tangent, but last thing I want to leave you with is know what you're reading, know what you're signing. And I did a seminar in Brazil where I had the entire room chanting, "If the deal's not good for you, don't do it."
Yeah.
And no matter how much you want to sell that retailer, if the deal's not good, don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I take that to heart because my story. When I was 20, I created a cosmetics line and it took off like wildfire. I was not prepared for it at all. It was by myself. I had no coaching, not even from my parents. And QVC and Espanol called. And I was like, yes, I was the yes man. Absolutely, I can fill those orders. Absolutely, I can fill a warehouse. I was operating out of my home office and I was 20 years old. And they cut me a check and I went into production. That crushed my business.
Yeah.
I had no resources and no reason to be playing in that pool at such an early stage. And it crushed my business. It crushed my overnight success and it was gone forever. So a move like that, and you can search those stories online too, where other vendors and product developers did the same thing with Target or whomever, and it really poisoned their business, not because of the relationship, but the readiness that they had to get into that relationship. So you actually said something to me once too that I want to share if you're still a little nervous after this conversation. You said to me that it's actually kind of difficult to fall for a buyer to kind of get rid of your product. See, I was under this notion, which probably many of us are, that if you're not performing or if you do something wrong or say something wrong, you're like the guillotine, out the door, no questions asked. And you kind of alluded to the fact that it's not quite like that. And it's actually a little difficult to be kicked out of a store. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, there's really only two things that will get you kicked out of a retailer. One of those is poor product. So if your product wasn't vetted and has some quality issues and returns start to skyrocket because of the quality of the product, that can get you kicked out. And then logistics. Your ability to deliver on time every time when you say you can is everything. And interestingly enough, a lot of suppliers leave this to the end. They think as long as I got the order, whether I show up a week late or a week early, it's all good. No, it's not good. If they want it there at the warehouse on the 15th, that's when they want it there because they have hundreds of trucks coming in. And by the way, your product goes from there into a store, and then there's a planogram that hits that store at the same time that gets given to the employees who have to now reset a section. The product needs to be there for that. Otherwise, there's this big hole now in the section, and they're waiting for your product, and they don't like that. There's a big picture. There's a big picture. So those two things can get you kicked out. Now, there are also seasonal things that if your product is not selling to expectation, the retailer has the ability to go back and look at the vendor agreement and make decisions on your product based on what they're able to do if it's just sitting there. So, and this is a much longer conversation than we can do right now, but I will tell you that your proactiveness in the sales of your product and understanding how they're selling through, don't put your head in the sand if your product starts to not sell and pretend like it's not happening. You need to start working with the buyer. Maybe you're going to do a markdown. Maybe you're going to do a promotion. Maybe you're going to do some stuff to stimulate the sales so that you don't get to the end of the period of your product being there and half of it's still there and they want to send it back. Okay. You know, I had a client that had a big line for back to school into Office Depot. It wasn't selling the way I wanted it to sell. It just wasn't. Now, it eventually started to peak and sell really well, but it still wasn't enough. And so even I pushed the buyer to mark it down even before they wanted to, because I wanted it to be all gone and sell through, and we didn't want any product back. And so even though they were not yet looking to say, hey, it's not selling well enough, but I already knew that it was going to not, we would have too much left over, even though it did start to ramp up. So we marked it down earlier than expected. We got rid of it all. And I maintained my relationship with the buyer. I kept them out of trouble because they had excess inventory. They don't want to send it back either because they sold your product to their boss. So when all of a sudden they have to send half of it back, they don't look so good. And so we were proactive. And even when the buyer said, I don't think we should, I'm like, no, we need to start marking it down. And by the way, we built that markdown into the cost of the product that we sold them. So it didn't cost us any money.
Working with a consultant like you is, it's necessary. It's a requirement. You can only go so far because, number one, you don't know many of the things that you're doing to. Tim's insight in just that example alone, you know, these products are coming out of our own little hands or our kids' hands, and we're emotionally attached to all this stuff. So you need someone like Tim to say, I understand the emotion behind it, but you're also going to get a truck in the next, 30 days with all this stuff right back to you if we don't execute on XYZ plan. And only a consultant like him has that insight. We don't have 25 years of experience across multiple stores and trends and fluctuations in the retail market like someone like Tim does. So like he mentioned, thank you so much for offering our audience that. You can book a free call with Tim. Just wherever you are in your journey. If it's just an idea or if you're ready to kind of take the road to retail, tlbconsulting.com will get you in contact with Tim Bush. If there are any questions, feel free to put them right there in the Facebook chat or in the Facebook comments, and they'll get right directly to us. But Tim, thank you so much once again for doing all of this for us. You're just a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you being here.
Well, I'm excited just to help young entrepreneurs. Thanks for giving me the chance to speak to your audience. And it's not out of reach for any of you. Okay. The journey might seem long, but it's not out of reach. And the next time your kid says something about an idea that they have, think of the movie Big, right? Think of Tom Hanks as a kid in a man's body playing with toys in the corporate office. All of a sudden, the things he's saying are making sense, and they're nothing of the things that the other people are saying. So the next time your kid has an idea, pay attention.
Yeah,
it might be $1 million.
Yeah, and we say that throughout everything that we publish. Your child does not have to be an actor, a model, an ice skater, an entrepreneur. They don't have to be any of those things. One of my favorite stories is a 5-year-old kid who was building with Lego blocks on the floor and had a big castle made up. And he said to his little brother, he said, you know, we should have stickers to make these Legos look like stone. And mom was sitting right there on the couch and her little light bulb went off. And immediately they had a product called Brick Sticks. That was 10 years ago. The kid was 5, he's now 15, and that product is still on the market today. And of course, the kid doesn't care about Legos anymore at 15, but the mom was enlightened enough to say, this has value, I can find a market for this. And the child is just sitting on the floor being a kid. So don't let that idea of, well, my kid isn't interested in anything, or, you know, doesn't stick with anything too long. He's a kid. He's coming from a place of genius, and a lot of those ideas that are quite imaginative and creative have a ton of value in the market. I mean, and that's what retailers are looking for. They're looking for that pure genius that's not shrouded by all the stuff that we adults put on things, right? Nobody's going to buy this. Is it the right price? Is it marketable? Kids don't think that way, right?
No, it just comes out. It just comes out of their mouth and then it's gone, by the way. So it is up to you for the light bulb to go on, because your kid will say that and then they're on to the very next thing. You know, their mind is a habit trail, you know, and so you have to be the one that collects those ideas. And I love that story. You know, I interviewed and right now I can't remember her name, the girl with the sugar-free lollipops.
Yeah, Alina Morris.
Yeah, so I interviewed her over a year ago on my podcast, and you know, the simple question was, you know, why can't I have a lollipop at the bank? Well, it's too much sugar. Well, why can't there be lollipops that taste good that don't have sugar in it? Just that idea alone, you know. And now they have taffy and all that kind of stuff, and you know, they're doing millions of dollars from a simple question. Sometimes it's not a statement. Sometimes it's a question. Why can't we? Because kids don't have that. Why can't we? Right? They don't have that. You know, why can't we do that? Yeah. I don't understand all the issues with that.
Yeah, but unfortunately, today's day and age with YouTube and, you know, all these YouTube stars and personalities, TikTok, we as parents assume in order for our child to be successful or have a following, they've got to have a channel and they've got to have, you know, subscribers. Not true at all. Yes, those people make it into retail because they have their own audiences, but any kid with any idea can make it into retail or, you know, into a brand or a following. So with
your help.
Yeah, with our help. So we promised a big surprise, and that is going to come next week in part 4, last part of this series of Big Box Kids, where we will actually show you live how to create and what exactly to put into your buyer's deck. Tim will be coaching me on how to create it, and I will be designing it. You will be seeing it right there live. And we're going to actually make sure that your kid, your business idea, is actually retail ready so that you can execute on all this stuff when you're ready. So stay tuned next Friday right here at 10 a.m. Eastern on Kids Business Summit on Facebook, and you can be a part of it. Or you can just go to bigboxkids.com and see it all there.
And remember, we're live, and so we're here to answer questions that you have. So don't hesitate to put questions into the chat because we'll answer those live.
Absolutely. And even if it's a replay, you can still do it. We'll still see it. Tim and I will see it and get right back to you, and you can create a relationship personally with us. So that is all for today. We don't have any questions at this time that are unanswered, but thank you all for watching, whether live or on the replay. We appreciate your time. And on behalf of Tim Bush and TLB Consulting, please join us next week. You can also binge listen to Tim's podcast ontheshelfnow.com. Is that right?
Ontheshelfnow.com. Mm-hmm.
Ontheshelfnow.com. Or you can geek out on all things kids business, which is at kidsbusinesssummit.com. So until next week, thanks so much for being here. Bye-bye now.
Bye, guys.